A passenger complained about a girl in first class. Her billionaire father landed and fired everyone. It was just another busy morning at the Los Angeles International Airport. Flight 482 to New York was preparing for departure, its gleaming fuselage reflecting the early sunlight. Inside, the hum of rolling luggage, clinking coffee cups, and hushed conversations filled the terminal. Among the travelers was a young woman named Isabella Harper, a 20-year-old with an air of quiet confidence. She wore a simple white blouse, navy slacks, and a soft smile that could light up a room without trying. Isabella had always preferred the back of the plane, away from the pomp and ceremony of first class. But today, her father, renowned billionaire businessman Edward Harper, had insisted she try a change of scenery. Life is about experiencing things differently, he had said, waving her off with a fatherly grin as he boarded his private jet first. First class was a world apart from Isabella's usual quiet travels. Plush leather seats stretched like thrones, attendants moved with precise grace, and the menu boasted delicacies she had never even heard of. Isabella's excitement, however, was short-lived. The complaint began innocuously. A middle-aged passenger, seated beside her, frowned and summoned the flight attendant. "I don't like sitting next to her," he said, gesturing vaguely at Isabella, his tone sharp. "Can she be moved?" The flight attendant, a young woman named Marissa, tried to keep her professional composure. "Sir, everyone has an assigned seat. Perhaps you could try." "No. This is unacceptable," the passenger interrupted, his face reddening. "I'm a paying first-class customer. She should not be here." Isabella blinked in surprise. She had never caused anyone trouble. She looked down at her hands, clasped nervously in her lap, and murmured, "Excuse me." The flight attendant hesitated, unsure how to respond. Meanwhile, the passenger continued to fume, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Murmurs spread like wildfire, and soon a small crowd had gathered, all witnessing the spectacle. It was then that Isabella realized something. The flight attendant was now whispering into her walkie-talkie, clearly summoning help. And help, as it turned out, was already on its way, though in a very unusual form. Edward Harper, her father, had been traveling on another flight that morning. When he received an urgent call from Isabella's assistant about the incident, his expression darkened. Without hesitation, he diverted his private jet to LAX and made his way to the airport in record time. By the time Flight 482 was preparing for pushback, Edward Harper was already in the private terminal, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The boarding gate was still chaotic when he arrived. Flight attendants were trying to apologize to the offending passenger, but his complaints were growing louder and more absurd by the second. Edward approached the gate, his presence commanding attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but cutting through the noise like a knife. "What seems to be the problem here?" The passenger looked up, startled to see a man in a tailored navy suit standing before him. This girl shouldn't be in first class." She. Edward raised an eyebrow. "She? Who is she, exactly?" "My daughter, apparently." Isabella muttered, almost in disbelief, stepping forward. The crowd parted as Edward's presence drew eyes from every corner of the terminal. The passenger sputtered. I didn't know." Edward's eyes narrowed. "You did not know what? That she has a name? That she has a seat like everyone else? Or that her father can find out about this in mere minutes?" The man's face turned pale. He stammered, I was just..." Edward shook his head slowly, a dangerous calm in his gaze. Then, in a motion quicker than anyone could react, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Within moments, security and airline management were at his disposal. Every flight attendant, gate agent, and ground staff member involved in this nonsense, Edward said, his tone icy, is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Pack your belongings. You are no longer employed. Gasps filled the terminal. Some employees began to protest, but Edward's stare silenced them instantly. The man who had complained turned even paler, realizing the enormity of his mistake. "You see," Edward continued, "this is not just about your dissatisfaction. It is about decency, respect, and understanding that everyone, regardless of background or appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity." Isabella stood quietly beside her father, her initial embarrassment fading as she watched him handle the situation with unwavering authority. The flight attendants who had been rude or indecisive were escorted away, some clutching their personal items in stunned silence. The airline's management quickly realized that resistance was futile. Edward Harper's influence was undeniable. Finally, with the scene cleared, Edward turned to his daughter. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, his sharp gaze softening. Isabella nodded. I think so. It's just overwhelming." Edward smiled. "Overwhelming, yes. But sometimes life teaches us lessons in the most dramatic ways. Remember this moment, Isabella. Always stand tall, even when others try to pull you down." By the time Isabella settled into her first-class seat, the plane was ready for departure. The offending passenger had been quietly escorted off, muttering apologies that no one cared to hear. The cabin was calm once more, the previous chaos fading into a surreal memory. As the plane soared into the sky, Isabella glanced out the window, her reflection mingling with the clouds. She felt a newfound sense of confidence. For the first time, she understood what it meant to have a protector not just in her father, but in herself. And Edward? He leaned back in his seat, hands clasped, watching his daughter with pride. He knew that in a world full of entitlement and ignorance, it sometimes took a dramatic intervention to remind people of the power of respect. That day, at 30,000 feet above the ground, Isabella Harper learned a simple truth: dignity is non-negotiable, and those who underestimate it often face consequences they never imagined. And for the airline employees who had treated her unfairly, that lesson came in the most unforgettable way possible: firing orders delivered by a billionaire father who didn't tolerate nonsense, especially when it involved his daughter. By the time Flight 482 touched down in New York, Isabella was smiling. First class no longer seemed intimidating. She had faced judgment, chaos, and injustice, and emerged stronger, with her father's unwavering support and a story she would never forget.